Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. Before I get started today, a quick correction to yesterday's episode. Indiana's overall record going into the Purdue game was 14-9 instead of 11-6, like I said, which made no sense with a conference record of 6-7. 11-6 was the score at the time of the Bobby Knight meltdown. Okay, I feel better now. Here's today's episode. It's February 24th, and on this day in 1985, it was the greatest game nobody ever saw. Do you remember the old USFL? It was an alternative to the NFL that started up in 1982, and it was able to attract some top players, a lot of which ended up in the NFL after the league folded in 1986. Well, on this day in 85, it was Week 1 in the USFL. The Super Bowl had been played a month prior. In this season opener, it was two future NFL Hall of Famers battling it out. It was the Los Angeles Express, led by Steve Young, against Jim Kelly and the Houston Gamblers. Aside from the 19,000 in the stands that day, not many more saw this one, and it was a great one. Kelly's Gamblers were up by a touchdown at half, but Young and the Express scored 27 straight to take a 33-13 lead in the fourth quarter. Jim Kelly led the Gamblers back, scoring 3 unanswered touchdowns in the final 10 minutes. The last one, a connection with future Washington Redskin Ricky Sanders for his third TD catch of the day, with a minute 28 left to give Houston the 34-33 come-from-behind win. Kelly threw for a Pro Football record 574 yards, topping Norm Van Brocklin's 34-year-old mark of 554 yards. But nobody outside the stadium saw it live. ABC had planned to carry the game live, but they pulled coverage to instead show Doug Flutie's pro debut, who was playing for the New Jersey Generals. The game wasn't even shown in the local markets of LA or Houston. There were highlights on ESPN, which was just 5 years old at that point, and on local newscasts, but that was it. And since there wasn't any live coverage, the original footage of the game had no live announcers. You can find video of the game on YouTube with audio that was added later from cassette tapes that were found at a later date. As for the USFL, this was its final season. The league made a poor decision led by an initiative by the New Jersey Generals owner to go head-to-head with the NFL in the fall. There was hope for a merger with the NFL, but that never materialized, and the league lost more than $160 million. But what did materialize, a lot of top players in the USFL, like Young, Kelly, and Sanders, were absorbed by NFL teams. Also on this day, in 1978, NBA player Clifford Ray saved the life of a dolphin. This is a great story. Ray was a Golden State Warrior, but had been on the injured list for a while and was finally healthy enough to play. He was about to head to the airport to fly to Washington and meet up with the rest of his team. But a phone call from Marine World put him on a different path. Mr. Spock, a dolphin at Marine World, had been in the pool when some maintenance was being done. One of the guys dropped a bolt with a sharp end to it, and before they could retrieve it, Mr. Spock figured the shiny object to be a fish treat and swallowed it whole. Mr. Spock was checked out. Surgery was deemed too risky, and the Marine vet didn't have a tool long enough to get to it. Clifford Ray was well known to have very long arms, 45-inch long arms to be more exact. He also knew one of the marine biologists who worked at Marine World, and she gave Clifford a desperate call for help. Once he heard the story and the dire predicament the dolphin was in, Ray did not hesitate. He showed up at the aquarium, suited up, lubed up, and was instructed to stick his hand down the dolphin's throat, go past the first stomach, and then locate the bolt in the dolphin's second stomach. He had a limited amount of time to work with, and he found it. palming the bolt in his huge hand so the pointy end would not damage any organs on the way out. Without a doubt, Ray saved Mr. Spock. In a recent interview, Ray talked about going back to Marine World in the weeks and months after he helped out, saying that Mr. Spock always recognized him and always made a point to swim over to say hello. Ray released a children's book about that day within the last couple of months titled Big Clifford Ray Saves the Day, about the heroic feat he performed on this day in 1978. And on this day in 1961, a wreck involving Lee Petty and Johnny Beauchamp nearly cost both men their lives. And if you watch the footage of this crash, you will wonder how either one of them survived. It was a qualifying race for the 1961 Daytona 500, and the two were racing each other in turns 3 and 4 when a slow car caused Petty to slow down. Beauchamp plowed into the back of his car and pushed it up the track. The cars blew through the barrier and flew hundreds of feet. The two cars barrel rolled into the air before crashing to the ground. Both men had to be cut from their mangled cars. Doctors did not think Petty was going to live through the night, but he did. He spent 4 months in the hospital. He did race a few times over the course of the next 3 years, but this wreck essentially ended his competitive career. Beauchamp never got in a race car again. If you'd like to check out the wreck yourself, I put a link to the video in the show notes. It is one of the scariest wrecks you will see. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on this day in sports history. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.